The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a marvel of engineering and hubris, a colosseum of power where the galaxy's most dominant species dictated the fate of countless worlds. Tiered seats stretched toward the vaulted ceiling, each occupied by the delegates of ancient empires. At the chamber's center floated the Prime Arbiter, a bulbous, crystalline being whose voice resonated like a chorus. On this day, the agenda revolved around an unassuming species, humanity. Standing alone at the speaker's dais was Ambassador Elias Carr, representing Earth and its colonies. His tailored suit, though refined, looked out of place amid the opulent robes and ceremonial armor of the counselors. Carr's expression was measured, a mask of calm that concealed the weight of his mission. He knew the odds. Humanity had entered this chamber as a curiosity, an upstart species barely 3 centuries into interstellar travel. He also knew the stakes. Earth's future lay in the hands of beings who saw humanity as little more than a nuisance. Carr began his address, his voice firm yet respectful. Honored counselors, I come on behalf of humanity to propose a partnership. We bring advancements in energy efficiency, terraforming techniques, and medical technology, innovations that could benefit all member species. A ripple of dismissive murmurs spread across the chamber. From the high tiers, a delegate of the Vorthax Dominion, a reptilian species with scales that shimmered like oil, hissed loudly. And what, Ambassador, does humanity expect in return? Protection from threats you cannot handle? Charity from those of us who have conquered the stars for millennia? Laughter followed, a chorus of derision that echoed through the chamber. Carr stood firm, his fingers tightening slightly on the podium. We seek mutual respect and fair trade, he replied, his tone unyielding. Humanity does not ask for charity. We offer an exchange of equals. The Prime Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed faintly, a sign of annoyance. Ambassador Carr, it intoned, its voice reverberating through the hall. You speak of equality as though it is something to be granted. Yet humanity has contributed nothing of note to this council. You are a species of latecomers, untested by the crucible of galactic conflict. Why should we consider your proposal seriously? Carr held the Arbiter's gaze, or what passed for one in the crystalline mass. Because underestimating humanity would be a mistake. We have faced our crucibles, wars, plagues, the brink of ecological collapse, and we have emerged stronger each time. We seek peace, not because we are weak, but because we understand its value. Another wave of laughter erupted, louder this time. A towering Zalathian delegate, covered in segmented chitin, leaned forward, its mandibles clicking in mockery. Peace is the language of those too feeble for war. Perhaps the Council should adopt your world as a protectorate. We would ensure your species survives, at least as laborers. Carr's jaw tightened, but he gave no outward sign of anger. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data crystal. I had hoped for dialogue, but perhaps actions speak louder. This crystal contains a fraction of what humanity has achieved. Technological advancements we offer freely, should we reach an agreement. The Arbiter waved a translucent appendage dismissively. Enough, Ambassador. Humanity's place is clear, beneath the Council's authority. Your proposals are rejected. The chamber erupted into applause, the delegates reveling in their dismissal of the human envoy. Carr stood silently, absorbing the weight of their arrogance. When the noise subsided, he spoke again, his voice quieter but far sharper. Members of the Council, your decision is noted, but allow me to leave you with a warning. Do not mistake diplomacy for submission. Humanity has always valued peace, but we are no strangers to war. Should you force our hand, you will find that we are far less forgiving than you imagine. The room fell silent. For a brief moment, the counselors regarded Carr with something bordering on respect or perhaps unease. Then the Prime Arbiter's voice broke the tension. Your threats are as empty as your species' legacy. This meeting is adjourned." Carr turned and walked away, his back straight, his expression unreadable. The laughter resumed behind him, but he paid it no mind. As he exited the chamber and boarded his shuttle, he tapped the communicator on his wrist. A holographic interface appeared, displaying a single word, Erebus. "Begin activation protocols," he said quietly. The galaxy might have laughed today, but humanity's answer was already in motion. The Galactic Council's sanctions hit Earth harder than anticipated. Merchant fleets were turned away from starports. Trade routes, once tenuous but promising, were blockaded by patrol ships bearing the Council's insignia. Supplies of vital raw materials dwindled, and humanity's economic lifeline began to fray. On Earth, the news painted a grim picture of isolation, while the Council reveled in their display of dominance. Ambassador Elias Carr stood in a packed command room deep within the United Earth Coalition headquarters. The air was thick with tension, punctuated by the soft hum of holographic displays showing the Council's expanding blockade. Carr's voice was steady but laced with frustration as he addressed the gathered officials. "This is not diplomacy. It's extortion," he said, his words sharp and deliberate. "They've ignored our proposals, humiliated us, and now they're squeezing us dry to force submission." General Lena Trask, commander of Earth's Defense Forces, leaned forward, her scarred face set in a grim frown. "And they think we'll fold. Typical Council arrogance. They don't believe we have the means or the will to fight back." Carr sighed, rubbing his temples. "They see us as primitives. Offering our technology wasn't enough. Appealing to reason wasn't enough. How far are we willing to go, General?" Trask's eyes hardened. "As far as we need to. They've made it clear they'll only respect strength." The Council escalated their campaign with chilling precision. Earth's outlying colonies reported frequent inspections by Council ships, thinly veiled raids that stripped them of resources. Diplomatic envoys sent to mediate were detained, interrogated, or worse. The final straw came during a summit on a neutral station orbiting Tau Ceti. Earth had sent one of its most respected diplomats, Ambassador Delavos, to appeal directly to the Council's leadership. The Council's response was as brutal as it was symbolic. The delegation never returned. Weeks later, a heavily encrypted transmission reached Earth, a recording of Voss standing in chains before the Galactic Council chamber. Her voice was steady, even as she faced her executioners. "To the people of Earth," she began, her gaze unwavering despite her evident injuries. "Remember that strength is not measured by cruelty, but by resolve. They may take my life, but they will never take humanity's spirit." The transmission ended with a display of the Council's arrogance. Voss burned alive in a public execution broadcast across the galaxy. It was not only a punishment, but a message, one designed to instill fear. The effect was the opposite. In the same command room where Carr had pleaded for restraint, the mood was now one of cold, calculated resolve. General Trask stood at the center, her presence commanding as she addressed the gathered officials. "They've declared war," she said flatly. "They just don't realize it yet." Carr, seated nearby, looked up from his clasped hands. His diplomatic demeanor had been replaced by something harder, almost unrecognizable. "If we respond with anything less than absolute force, they'll continue to mock us. We can't afford hesitation." Trask nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's time." Behind the scenes, Earth had been preparing for such a moment. Hidden deep within the asteroid belt was a secret military project codenamed Erebus. For years, engineers, scientists, and tacticians had worked in silence, creating a warship unlike any the galaxy had seen. The Erebus was not just a weapon. It was a statement, a vessel of immense size and unmatched firepower. equipped with experimental shielding and an artificial intelligence capable of processing millions of combat scenarios in real time. It was humanity's ace, designed for the day diplomacy failed. As orders were transmitted to activate the Erebus, the atmosphere in the command room shifted. Where there had been frustration and despair, there was now determination. Carr stood, his gaze meeting Trask's. When they see what we're capable of, they'll regret underestimating us. Trask smirked. Oh, they'll regret it. All right. But not before they learn just how far we're willing to go. The room buzzed with activity as the activation protocols were initiated. Across Earth's colonies, military personnel prepared for a war they had hoped to avoid. In the silence of the asteroid belt, the Erebus came to life, its engines humming with a low, ominous growl. The warship's massive hull shimmered as it emerged from the shadows, its weapon systems primed. For the Galactic Council, humanity's response would be swift, precise, and unforgettable. The war had begun. The Erebus loomed in the void like a predator waiting to strike. Its obsidian hull absorbed the faint starlight, rendering it nearly invisible against the abyss. Within, the warship systems hummed with latent power, an orchestra of precision and lethality guided by its artificial intelligence, Athena. In the command deck, General Lena Trask stood at the center, her hands clasped behind her back. Her eyes scanned the holographic displays, showing the positions of the Galactic Council's blockade fleet. They were staggered in a predictable formation, their confidence in their numbers evident. Trask's lips curled into a grim smile. They're not even trying to hide their arrogance, she muttered, addressing the crew around her. Athena's voice, smooth and calculated, resonated through the deck. Analysis of enemy fleet movements indicates a 93% likelihood of underestimating this vessel's capabilities. Optimal strike vectors calculated and ready for execution, General. Trask nodded. Prepare the stealth drives. Let's make them feel untouchable, right before we remind them what fear really is. The Erebus glided toward the blockade, undetected. Its stealth technology, a combination of adaptive cloaking and electromagnetic suppression, rendered it a ghost. The Council's ships continued their patrols, oblivious to the predator in their midst. Ambassador Elias Carr stood nearby, watching as the crew operated with military precision. He felt an uneasy mix of pride and dread. Humanity had always excelled in adversity, but this, unleashing the Erebus, felt like stepping into uncharted moral territory. Do you think they'll even understand the message we're sending? Carr asked, his voice low. Trask didn't turn to face him. Her gaze remained fixed on the holographic display. They'll understand, all right. Fear speaks every language. The first strike was surgical. The Erebus targeted the largest cruiser in the blockade fleet, an Icarian dreadnought, bristling with heavy artillery. From the silent void, a single lance of plasma erupted, piercing the dreadnought's shields and cutting through its hull like a blade through paper. The ship detonated in a violent cascade of light and debris. Panic rippled through the Council's fleet. Ships scrambled to defensive positions, their captains barking orders as alarms blared. But the Erebus was already moving, a phantom weaving between the panicked vessels. Its railguns fired with pinpoint accuracy, each shot dismantling a target before the enemy could react. Within minutes, the once imposing blockade was in disarray. Smoke and wreckage filled the void. The Council's fleet reduced to scattered remnants. The Erebus came to a halt, its massive form revealed as it deactivated its cloaking systems. For the surviving Council ships, the sight of the warship was a nightmare made real. Aboard the Council's flagship, Admiral Calvaries of the Vorthax Dominion stared at the tactical displays, his clawed hands trembling. He had been assured that humanity posed no significant threat, that their technology was primitive, their resolve weak. Now he watched as the remains of his fleet drifted lifelessly in the void. "What is that monstrosity?" he whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. A transmission interrupted his despair. The visage of General Trask appeared on the display, her expression cold and unyielding. "This is General Lena Trask of the United Earth Coalition. You've underestimated us for the last time." Her tone was sharp, each word deliberate. "Withdraw your forces and prepare to negotiate, or the next strike will leave nothing of your fleet." Admiral Calvaries hesitated, his pride warring with the stark reality before him. The warship had already destroyed a fleet that had taken decades to build, and his reinforcements were light years away. With a shaking claw, he opened a channel to the council chamber. They've unleashed something we cannot contend with," he admitted, his voice cracking. "The humans are not the prey we believe them to be." Back on the Erebus, Carr watched the destruction unfold with a grim satisfaction. The Council's arrogance had been their undoing, but this was only the beginning. Humanity had made its presence known, but now they had to decide how far they were willing to go. Trask turned to her crew, her voice carrying a commanding edge. Athena analyzed Council communications. "Let's see how they're scrambling to salvage their pride." Athena responded instantly, her tone devoid of emotion. Intercepted transmissions indicate widespread panic among Council fleets. Their leadership is requesting emergency sessions to address humanity's response. Trask allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. Good. Let them panic. It's about time they learn what humanity is capable of. As the Erebus loomed over the shattered remains of the blockade, the galaxy's balance of power had shifted. The Council had laughed at humanity, but now their laughter was silenced, replaced by the cold, unmistakable grip of fear. The remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet drifted in the void, broken and battered. Their once proud warships, symbols of untouchable power, now lay fragmented and vulnerable. The Erebus hung like a dark moon above them, its engines humming with a steady, ominous pulse. Admiral Calvaries, still recovering from the shock of the previous assault, now faced the harsh reality of his situation. His once confident demeanor had crumbled, and with it, his belief in the Council's superiority. His fleet had been shattered in a matter of hours. The humans' warship, a monolithic nightmare of technology and firepower, had proven unstoppable. Aboard the Erebus, General Trask surveyed the aftermath. The battle had been swift, calculated. They had crippled the Council's forces, but the war was far from over. This victory was only the opening gambit in a larger game. The Council's leadership had to be humbled, forced to reckon with the consequences of their hubris. Ambassador Elias Carr stood beside her, his eyes focused on the shattered fleet. They'll never recover from this, not without a complete shift in how they view us. His voice was steady, but the weight of what had happened hung over him like a storm cloud. We've proven ourselves to them. They won't make the same mistake again. Trask glanced at him, her expression unreadable. The Council will regroup. They always do. But it won't matter. She turned her attention back to the wreckage. Because we won't give them the chance to rebuild. At the Council's central command, panic set in. The once proud leaders of the galaxy now found themselves scrambling to piece together the remnants of their power. Their fleets lay in tatters, their control of the galaxy slipping from their grasp. Desperation seeped into the council chambers as leaders of various alien races began turning on one another, each blaming the others for the humiliating defeat. Admiral Calvaries, now stripped of his dignity, addressed the council with a hollow voice. "The humans, they've proven themselves to be far more dangerous than we believed. Their warship, it's beyond anything we could have anticipated." The council's response was swift but disjointed. They had never expected humanity to retaliate with such force. For the first time in their long reign, they were forced to question the foundation of their authority. They had mocked humanity for its lack of advanced weaponry, for its primitive ways. But now their mockery had become a bitter taste in their mouths. They had pushed too far. On the Erebus, Trask received the first transmission from the Council's reeling leaders. The voice was tremulous, full of pride that had been shattered beyond repair. General Trask, the voice of Counselor Xylox crackled through the calm. You have made your point. We offer terms of surrender. We are willing to negotiate. Trask didn't even let him finish. Her hand shot out, silencing the transmission. We're not here to negotiate, she said coldly. We're here to take what's ours. Carr looked at her, his expression a mix of admiration and unease. We've won the battle. Do you really want to take it this far? Trask met his gaze with unflinching resolve. The Council needs to understand that humanity won't be cowed. Not anymore. The Erebus shifted its course toward the heart of the Council's capital, an ancient city ship orbiting a dying star. As it approached, the sheer scale of the warship became apparent. It was a monster in every sense, vast, implacable, and indomitable. The Council could see it now, looming on the horizon, and the fear was palpable. When the warship's weapons were unleashed once more, they weren't aimed at the Council's ships, but at their heart, at the city ship that had been their center of power for millennia. The first salvo obliterated the outer defenses. The second cut through the central command tower with surgical precision. The Council's capitulation was swift. They had no choice. Faced with the annihilation of their home base and the unrelenting advance of humanity, they finally surrendered. Their fleet scattered into the farthest reaches of space, unable to stop the tide of humanity's ascendance. General Trask stood at the helm of the Erebus, watching the capital's destruction in silence. The message had been delivered, loud and clear. Ambassador Carr, standing beside her, allowed himself a brief smile. They'll remember this day. The galaxy will remember it. Trask nodded, her gaze unwavering. This is just the beginning. We've shown them what happens when they underestimate humanity. In the depths of space, humanity's dominance had begun. The Council's humiliation was complete, and the galaxy was left to grapple with the newfound reality. The age of human submission was over. The era of humanity's rule had just begun. As the Erebus sailed through the stars, its silhouette an undeniable symbol of power, the galaxy knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer a bystander. They were the new apex,